is Alexander Scott, a member of LANS, presenting this week's edition of our updates. Before we begin, a reminder to please visit our website at jalans.org to view more party material, or follow us on social media. Our Twitter handle is @lans_JA. First, we will begin with the recently held CARICOM Africa Summit. On the 7th of September, the first CARICOM Africa Summit was held, which saw representatives from both the African Union, that is, Africa's continental representative body, and CARICOM gather virtually to discuss strengthening ties between our regions and ways to further engage in trade relations which are beneficial to both regions. Areas which were mentioned as potentially beneficial to both regions included investment and integration of our blue economies, that is, the area of the economy concerning the exploitation, preservation, and growth of seas and oceans, transportation, technology exchange, the exchange of manufacturing, as well as the lifting of visa requirements so as to allow for easier travel between the African continent and CARICOM member states. Also, at the meeting, the two bodies condemned in no uncertain terms the unilateral sanctions which have been imposed on both Cuba and Zimbabwe, actions which have been deemed illegal under international law. This meeting, which should have been held last year but was postponed due to the COVID pandemic and therefore was forced to be held virtually this year, is something which should be commended. It should be really commended by everybody, and it needs to be encouraged. There need to be more meetings like this. The idea of South-South linkages, that is, creating links between countries in the global South, is something which we at LANS have long championed and called for as a group, and it's very good to see that it's finally being taken seriously at the level of national leadership. Now, the benefits of South-South linkages and trade in general are enormous and offer us the possibility to not only grow, but to grow on our terms which are suitable to ourselves and with partners who are not seeking to dominate and undermine us, but instead are also seeking to attain growth. The benefits of such linkages are already bearing fruit, as CARICOM and Jamaica in particular have, since the onset of this pandemic, been accessing vaccines, COVID vaccines, through the African Medical Support Platform. Regions which have a shared history of colonialism and underdevelopment as a result of imperial actions, and let me just remind us that CARICOM and the African continent, we have that shared history. We must band together and assist each other if our independence is to be something more than a mere trinket. This is why the two bodies at this meeting vehemently condemned the illegal sanctions on countries within their regions, because those sanctions are a clear attempt to undermine the independence of those nations. We must share our resources, we must share our knowledge, and we must share our skills with each other across the global South if we are to attain a level of development which will be to the benefit of the majority of our citizens as opposed to a few and their imperial backers. Next, we move on to foreign affairs, focusing on events in Brazil and Guinea. On Sunday, the 5th of September, the president of Guinea-Conakry, Alpha Condé, was overthrown in a military coup carried out by that nation's special forces, led by one Mamadi Doumbouya. The now former president was an unpopular figure in his country, who has overseen an administration mired in corruption, leaving the country very poor despite its mineral wealth, and he was a leader whose tenure in office had seen a marked increase in apathy among the public, who saw really no feasible way of removing him. The coup leader has gone on to state that the actions were carried out because of the corruption carried out by the former administration, and it was again carried out because of the general dissatisfaction among the people towards the former president. He has promised to form a government of national unity. In Brazil, on the 7th of September, their Independence Day, supporters of far right President Bolsonaro attempted to overthrow the Supreme Court in what was to be the first step in a bid to have him, Bolsonaro, retain power. The president hoped to have millions of his supporters come out in order to achieve this goal, but in the end, we are seeing reports that only 500,000 nationally could be mustered for this event. The attempted coup was roundly condemned by political parties in Brazil on all sides of the spectrum, that is, from left to right, and almost all media houses have come out condemning this action, and this includes media houses which supported Bolsonaro in his first run for the presidency. They're also calling for his removal from office. Now, the coup in Guinea must be condemned, and it is excellent news that ECOWAS, that is the regional body representing West Africa, has suspended Guinea. Yes, President Conde was corrupt, and he used illegal means to retain power. But this coup is not being undertaken for the betterment of the people of Guinea, who have suffered for decades. The army of Guinea has in fact benefited from the corruption which has left the people in these dire straits. And this army in fact only launched this coup shortly after legislation was passed, meaning that they would be getting a pay cut. So for them to suddenly act as the saviors now is really hard to believe. The special forces which carried out this coup were trained by the United States African Command, that is the military support, that is the military arm, dealing with Africa and based in Germany. African Command, otherwise known as AFRICOM. The head of the special force team in Guinea, the coup leader, is a former officer in the French armed forces. He's a former French legionnaire, and he attended training school with the leader of the military junta, which took power in a coup in Mali. And both armies, that is the Malian army and the Guinean army, are a part of the French neo-colonial project in the Sahel, ostensibly aimed at tackling terrorists, but really aimed at securing French and, by proxy, US presence in the region as the continent moves more towards dealing with China and other nations in the global south. The attempted coup and the continued agitation by the far right in Brazil, though unsuccessful for now, must be watched. It is true that Bolsonaro has lost many influential people who supported his first run, but big business, by and large, in total remains behind him. The army high brass remains behind him, and while the media has turned on him, they are also owned by oligarchs who have serious vested interests. With Lula da Silva being the front runner and the Liberals now again being offered a choice of some form of left-wing governance or proto-fascism, we must not be surprised if they will choose the latter. They did it in the previous election, and we are seeing signs of them doing this now. Members of the left across the region, across Latin America and the Caribbean in particular, must stand with the workers of Brazil as they combat this fascism, which is being aided and abetted by members of the United States far-right, individuals such as Steve Bannon, who are allying with Bolsonaro's sons to concoct this scheme. If they are successful in Brazil, they will then turn their attention to Venezuela and other members of the Latin American axis of imperial resistance. That is, nations such as Cuba, Nicaragua, Bolivia. And they will seek to reassert the United States hegemony on the region, leaving us all in a weaker position as we aim to build a future free from oppression and a society that benefits all. Finally, we will end by looking at the government's handling of the coronavirus pandemic. On Thursday, the 9th of September, it was reported in the Jamaica Guinea that some 600,000 persons have been provided with vaccines against the COVID virus. The breakdown of this shows that some 151,755 persons are fully vaccinated, while some 448,245 individuals have only been partially vaccinated. This leaves the nation at a 5% vaccination rate and some way off of the health minister's target of a 65% vaccination rate by March of next year. The vaccination attempts have been hampered by the fact that many Jamaicans are either skeptical of or outright refuse to be vaccinated, and this was revealed by a recently published poll in Nationwide News. Now, the pandemic has continued to affect the education sector as well, and with most schools still being below 65% of the vaccinated threshold that was stated by the Ministry of Education, they are not going to have face-to-face classes. They're not going to be returning to face-to-face classes. So the new school year began with students going back to online virtual learning. Now, this comes as a Jamaica Observer article pointed out that there are still almost 100 schools that are without any form of internet connection at all, meaning that it's going to be hard, if not impossible, for those schools to adequately reach the students through the virtual means for classes. It also needs to be noted that the vaccination rate among teachers that has been steadily increasing, while the vaccination rate among students, the individuals of student age, that population has not had a significant increase in the vaccination rate. This is in spite of the fact that when it was first announced that students would be uh, eligible to take vaccines, that we saw a rather quick uptick. So the first, when it was first announced, we had 40,000 students being vaccinated. We now only have an additional 2,000 vaccinated. So it's slowed down a lot. Now, the low vaccination rate nationally remains a serious issue, and it's obvious that the government has dropped the ball and has made a bad situation totally worse with their poor handling of the situation. So, looking at education, they've had over a year to adjust to and prepare for virtual learning, um, and they have not prepared the schools or the students. They've failed to do this, and so the students and the teachers are suffering just as they suffered in the last academic year and the academic year prior to that, the second half of that academic year. Um, Students who have, by ministry statements, missed out on whole semesters due to a lack of access to quality internet or any equipment, still by and large lack either proper connectivity or even the devices to access the education through virtual means. Now, if the people are to accept the vaccines, then they must be educated. They must be educated about why they need to take this vaccine. That means getting the information from sources they trust, sources they have faith in. And more importantly, it means not treating the people like fools. The Prime Minister in his drive to have the public know of the need to take the vaccine, has begun doing community tours. And good on him. That is good for him. If people listen to him and take the vaccine, awesome. But more beneficial would be using the musicians and the athletes who actually have to be vaccinated in order to travel and work as poster children of this vaccination campaign. Because whether we like it or not, that is the segment of society which has sway with the people. They have moral sway with the people, not the politicians, not the clergy. The lockdowns which have been implemented have a really callous edge. And we're seeing that as they leave people who work daily for their bread in limbo. And all of this is in an effort to lower the rate of spread of this virus, which is commendable, which is good. We need to be doing that. But with no assistance coming in the form of either money or, more importantly, material goods, that is food, medicine, gas, the suffering increases as people run the very real risk of being arrested for going to the corner shop to get necessities. It cannot be that citizens of this country must live under perpetual lockdown until and unless they are cowed by an authority they do not trust in order to be vaccinated, while tourists are free to arrive unimpeded to the island without being vaccinated. That is making a fool of the people and must not be allowed to stand. Consultation with the people, education on the matter, and not brute force will get the people to accept that they need this vaccine in order to return to not just normality, because our normality, what we call normal, is very strange, but to get to something better. And if we're not going to do that, anything else will see us remain in this state of stopping and starting the economy. One day we're having a lockdown, the next day we're opening up, and it's going to leave people with a real burning resentment against their government and against the people that this government is benefiting. Once again, this is Alexander Scott, and you've been listening to Land's Weekly News.